Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Review show. And Mike, I don't want to say it too loudly, but we actually won a game of football.
I know. It's weird, isn't it? I don't know what to do with myself.
What do we say now? I don't know what to do now. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think we say what a difference a win can make. Yeah, I think the proof in the pudding of how good this win is for confidence morale we'll see in the next game. But it's a monkey off the back for the players. Two B teams playing against each other. Let's get it right. It wasn't the first team's rebuild, but again, it's a nice little confidence booster for players and another game for that midfield trio to get used to each other.
Well, yeah, let's talk about how we kind of set up the game against Brentford. We switched back to that back five or back three, however you kind of interpret it. We played sort of a 3-5-2 with Rice, Souček and Paqueta filling that midfield three again, like we saw against Leeds. And then we kind of had Bowen and Antonio up front with Emerson and Johnson as our wing backs. How did you think that would have did you kind of immediately think, okay, we know Moyes' plan here. He wants to keep it tight and then kind of try and find those openings when we can and hopefully just nick a goal? Or what was your thoughts going into it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those, he wants to go like for like and trying to match them up kind of formation wise. Last time we played them, we got overrun in midfield. So going with the three in midfield kind of makes sense when you look at it from that perspective. Selection is what the selection is. I think we obviously all expected a bit more rotation, but again, there were a couple of niggles in the squad, such as Lanzini and Areola, which is why they stayed out. Obviously, some condemnation that Souček again was starting, but again, if Moyes sees this as his midfield trio, he needs to give them time to gel as a unit, which is obviously why he did that. So, it wasn't necessarily the most exciting one, but you would say it made sense. It was one about kind of trying to keep it tight, not make sure that we didn't give any kind of numerical advantages to Brentford. So I think, going three defenders against the two centre forwards, because Damsgaard pretty much played as a auxiliary striker. And then obviously going like for like in midfield kind of made sense to nullify really the things that they did so well against us last time.
Yeah, I think it was, Moyes looked at the last game, clearly thought, like you said, we've been overrunning that midfield and, that was where we were getting hurt against Brentford in the league. So he wanted to keep it tight. FA Cup match, it's always one of those, especially with the conditions that we will talk about a bit more with the pitch and the wind and the rain. It does make it very difficult to play in those scenarios. So I liked it a little bit. The personnel, maybe not so much with the likes of Ben Rama, Fornals on the bench, but then you had people like Scamacca who wasn't in the squad because of illness, injury. We don't know really. And yeah, it was a tough watch that first half. Let's kind of go through it because there wasn't really any chance for us, but we kept things relatively tight other than kind of one chance they did have in the first half, which was when Lewis Potter got the ball on the right-hand side, put in a really nice cross between Ogbonna and Dawson. And Visser's shot was saved really well from Fabianski. We have to give him credit because we've been on his back a bit the past few weeks, but Fabianski kept us in the game within that first 15 minutes.
Yeah, other than in that period, that probably was the biggest chance of the game. Really, the only chance of the game. I think in the first half, it was 3 shots each. We had 0 on target. They had 1 on target, which kind of paints the picture as to it just being a midfield slog, really. Yeah. The one kind of ray of hope we had was when there was again, and we'll probably talk about again a bit more throughout this as well, is he took possession on the left-hand side, had space, he actually moved into it, but what he did was he doesn't delay, doesn't kind of wait. He plays a lovely pass with some pace into Antonio, who, to be fair to Antonio, does really well and rolls the defender, with obviously the ball bouncing off the defender for Antonio. And at that moment, you're like, that's brilliant, smart piece of centre-forward play. But then Antonio does what Antonio does, and he then makes the wrong decision. He was 1v1 with the I think it's the right-sided centre-back at the time on the edge of the box. There are 2 other players kind of converging in, and rather than taking the player on the outside and realising he had Bowen in the box, because was a chance to cross it, potentially wasn't going to score from it because obviously where Bowen was positioning, unless he kicks front of the defender. Antonio inexplicably turns infield, has a terrible touch, and then they just kind of clear it. And that was our really only one shining moment in that kind of first half, bar when Paqueta did keep the ball in play and then was tripped. Before then, he'd flopped down quite easily afterwards, but he did actually get contact beforehand and then claimed he got a crack in the old sweets. But it was just a dire first half, and that moment from Brentford, you based on how our form had been, you would have expected that goal to go in. But it was a very good save from Fabianski. He closed down the angle really well. As a great cross from Potter. But I think all in all, we really kind of nullified Brentford. It certainly nullified us. We were okay in patches in possession, but largely it was, I don't want to say passive, because I've seen a lot of people say it's passive, because it wasn't necessarily passive. It was we were trying to be probing and trying to be economical with the ball, not just trying to toss it into the box.
Yeah.
When we got into the final third, we lacked either movement from our front two, or there was just a lack of invention. A couple of times when it would go into, say, Souček on the edge, he kind of would either turn in and stop, or a pass was maybe slightly overhit, or maybe not anticipated correctly by one of our players, and it really hampered us, especially in the first half.
I think what I noticed from the first half was Paqueta was often on that right side 8. He did switch kind of halfway through onto the left-hand side. I think Moyes switched over, but he was trying to get in those pockets and link up play very well, I thought. And there were a couple of moments where he would kind of look for that forward pass through the lines and maybe try and get a 1-2 with Souček or Antonio or Bowen, whoever was on that side. And again, it just kind of reminded me that we just lacked that technical quality in midfield around him. And if you look at that lineup, really, who is that technical gifted player that he can link up with? Because Bowen is not it. Antonio is definitely not it. Souček, again, definitely not it. And then the argument is really Rice, and he was playing as the holding 6. So it made it so difficult for us to actually create anything. Yep. Although we were pressing well, and, in times we made it very difficult for Brentford to play through us. It's just that transition. It's getting the chances at the other end, and that was what really made it a really sloppy first half.
Yeah, and I think that was one thing. The thing that I took from the first half was off the ball, we seem a much better drilled team, and a team that is actually starting to make more sense of how we are looking to press. And we still drop off. We don't necessarily, press the first kind of couple of passes or press the goalkeeper straight from the kind of restart. But what we're doing is we seem to be triggering the press a lot more. Obviously, Paqueta seems to actually be the trigger for a press. You just watch Paqueta, and once he goes, the team now seems to go, whereas before it didn't really seem to be that. And what I'm quite liking is that if someone goes past Paqueta, then Rice is there. There's often been the case that when someone actually did Rice, then Paqueta was there as well. So them two seem to really be working hard together. Souček is Souček. Defensively, he is actually quite good at press. He is good in tackling and good at kind of closing down space. So I kind of always expect that of him. Yeah. But again, it's when we get on the balls where we're lacking that quality. And one of those players that I mentioned before, Fornals, probably is a player that could and probably would improve that. I know people will then be concerned about the defensive side, but I think if you're operating Fornals as they were Souček, he's going to be the first press. Then you have Paqueta, and then you have Rice. So I don't necessarily see us being overrun because there's work rate. And also, if you look around the league, now, again, we'll take it to the very top level. Man City, for instance, their midfield generally makes up is De Bruyne, Rodri, and Bernardo Silva. Now, you would only say really Rodri is the defender in there. De Bruyne will work so hard, but he's not known for his tackling and so on. And Bernardo Silva, again, not known for his tackling, but the work rate is incredible with them, and they're both incredibly technical players. They defend a lot with the ball, but also off the ball, they are workhorses. Yeah. So I don't necessarily see the problem in having, say, a Fornals there, because there are teams, again, they are far more technical than us, but there are teams with lighter weight midfield who operate very, very well with a very good single anchor point who is physically strong, and then two amazing workers who can then obviously make things happen on the ball. So obviously we're not going to be at the level of Man City, but again, it's that it's not something that we should be afraid of. Even teams like Brighton have done it for the past few years. They've never had necessarily the most physically strong, but from an athletic point of view, they've got incredibly athletic, hard-working players. So it's something that I think we should look at. But clearly, based on the selection yesterday against Brentford, you can see that at least for the next 2 games, it is going to be Souček unless he drops 2 absolute stinkers, and then it will still be Souček.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at what happened in the second half, because there was a kind of tweak from Moyes, not from the personnel straight away, but with the formation. He kind of pushed Paqueta more into a 5-2-3 on that left-hand side, and he was also tracking back quite a lot as well. But he gave him that license to go forwards a bit more, and Souček was actually the one then dropping in a bit more as well. So he switched to a 5-2-3. I think that was just to see how the pattern developed before he made his sub in Benrahma, which we'll talk about. But firstly, we came out, looked okay, and we actually created a really good chance when Paqueta, again, he was on that left-hand side, picked up the ball, played a brilliant chip over the top. Emerson was then down the wing, who made a really good run, put a lovely cross into Souček, who was about, 6 yards out, and somehow missed a goal. But it was nice play.
No, it was. And what was good was actually there was some rotation in there as well. There's a bit of a kind of couple of passes between Paqueta and Rice. And then you just see that obviously that link from Leon is still there.
Yeah.
And he essentially has caught the eye of Emerson. Emerson's caught the eye and he's gone. And you can see the defender's then gone, oh no, because he's realised he hasn't spotted that movement. And the chip was so good that it allowed Emerson to didn't have to take a touch from that whole sequence. He was able then to slow himself down and wait for support. And that was the impressive thing, that he didn't, in the past, we've seen when we got in that position and someone's just fired it across. No one's been in the box, or someone's not even been there. We just fired it across. And he took the time to just wait just a second or two and then clipped it. Now, what I will say in Souček's defence is he's potentially unsighted from the defender going up to try and clear it. But still, he's completely unmarked,
Good score.
Completely under pressure. And he's misinterpreted the flight of the ball. He's got slightly ahead of it. And then he's had to try and bring his foot back a bit further. But even still, a scuff from there. Arguably, it should be going in.
Do you think he scores that 2 years ago?
I think he probably does. It's one of those things where I think he's struggling anyway, just in general. And it's one of those ones that probably, if he hits it probably even a bit scruffier, it probably just bobbles into the bottom left corner or just the side it went, and it probably maybe trickles in. Yeah. But it's one of those ones, it's not falling for him, so to speak, at the moment. And yeah, it's one of those ones you do look at in the game, you should score, really. It feels like being harsh on him to say that he should score because it was slightly behind him. But again, that's also down to him getting ahead of the ball. So yeah, it's disappointing because it should have been a goal, because it was a really good, smart move, let down then by Souček.
Other than that move, again, it was a pretty tough watch, to say the least. It was very scrappy between both sides. And with about 20 minutes to go, Moyes did make a sub, to be fair to him. He brought on Benrahma. Stuck with the 5-2-3, took Souček off, dropped Paqueta into that central role next to Rice that we saw against Brentford last time, and Benrahma was then occupying that left wing role. Immediately, we kind of saw a little bit of a difference, and about 10 minutes later, we actually got the goal from it, and it came from that high press that we spoke about against Leeds for that second goal when Souček went in. It was very similar. Ogbonna won the initial header up top. It kind of got to Wissa. It was a bit scrappy, but the press was there. Rice then goes in, makes a really, really good tackle, goes straight into the path of Benrahma, who turns, couple touches, and just, wow, brilliant strike. Keeper maybe should have done better, but that moment of brilliance that we didn't have on the pitch before Benrahma immediately showed. And yeah, we found ourselves 1-0 up with 10 minutes to go.
Yeah, I think it's just that bit of decisiveness, isn't it? It's someone taking responsibility. Now, and as you say, that press was good again, because Ogbonna obviously wins his first header, which is pretty standard for Ogbonna. It's not something he's always generally pretty.
I thought he had a really good game, actually, Ogbonna.
Yeah, I think when you put him in the middle like that, so he doesn't have to do as much running, and he essentially gets to just kind of marshal that defense and move laterally. He's actually a lot better than when you're asking him to be a bit more kind of vertical in some of his movements. He can kind of struggle. But he wins his first head. And again, as you say, the press, we were already in a decent position. We put pressure on. When they got the ball, they had no option really but to either play it back to the goalkeeper or fire it into midfield. And obviously, Wissa, came into a 50-50 with Rice, which he obviously came out on top. But obviously, the ball wasn't under control. So when it spilled out, fantastic from Rice again, just directly in. Fair play to the referee, because he could have very easily blown up there and said, "Oh no, you didn't win the ball, you took the man." But the ref, fair play to him, saw it as it was. And that was a fair tackle. Brentford player, you see one of them throw his arms up, hoping, I think more than anything, to get that.
Yeah.
And then Benrahma basically looked around and he saw Antonio to the left, but I think he also knew that, hang on, if I pass it there, he's gonna get pressed straight away. So it's actually, although it looks like a pass, it's actually, unless he's passing it a lot more at an angle, he's kind of taking him away from goal. So it was a good movement from Antonio because he actually creates that space as well. So we have to credit Antonio for that. And the hit, it was a fantastic hit. You've got to say the goalkeeper should be doing better. It's practically down his throat.
Yeah.
I will say is that there's good movement on the ball as it is when it is hit. So it kind of slightly wrong foots him, but you have to say the goalkeeper should be getting at least a hand on something that's almost down his throat. But again, who cares? From our perspective, the ball went in the back of the net. Again, it's another confidence booster for Benrahma, a player who seemingly keeps. I think it just feels like he's constantly getting his own digs in at Moyes just by playing well. At the moment, we know obviously there seems to be a bit of a let's say tense relationship there. You could maybe argue and say, but it's funny really because it's the player that, from an outside perspective, the manager doesn't appear to trust or necessarily value as highly as others, but he is the player that is performing the most for him, which is just the kind of the funny duality of it all.
I mean, he was actually full of a bit of praise for Benrahma in his post-match interview. He said he's a great player. He did really well when he came on. Sometimes it is nice to have him as an impact rather than starting, and he can affect the game a bit more when he comes on in those second halves. And he still couldn't help himself by saying, he still needs to pass in certain moments, but with a player like Benrahma, he will produce moments like that. And that's exactly, we saw it against Crystal Palace before the World Cup break. He has moments in patterns of play where he will take shots that will miss when he should have passed potentially, but he will also score. You could say the same for someone like Scamacca. He's going to take shots, but he's going to score your goals. And I think we lacked that. We lacked that for 70 minutes yesterday. We didn't have someone that was going to score us a goal. It did not look like we were ever going to score. So credit to Moyes for making that change. I think we also need to say that because he could have easily stuck with that 5-3-2. He did switch to the 5-2-3 in the second half, and it got us the victory. So we have to say fair play. We're into the next round. We'll find out who we've got. I don't know if the draw's today or tomorrow. It's probably tomorrow after the Arsenal game. But yeah, what are your kind of overall thoughts of the game before we end it with our man of the match?
Yeah, I think overall, whilst Moyes was also, if you look at his comments, also saying about he thinks the fans are seeing there is something changing and it's not necessarily where we want to be, but things will turn around soon. The turnaround soon message we've heard a lot of, and we haven't seen it. So, quite frankly, don't care about that comment. You need to start showing that turnaround rather than talking around it. So, no better than the Wolves and the Everton game. So, if we can turn around those two, fair enough. Your comment starts to have some weight that things are going to start turning around. Until that happens, it's just words, and we've heard a lot of words. In terms of saying things are changing, now I know many are saying there aren't, and everyone's entitled to his opinion. And in most cases, yes, they're correct. There's still the same issues with fluidity in possession. There's still not necessarily enough movement or dynamism in and around midfield, as well as up top, in which to kind of create openings. But one of the positives, and there is a big positive, is that we are playing and engaging with a slightly higher line. We are starting to press a lot more from the front. Again, from the back, we're also looking to press a bit more. Yes, there are the same old frailties, but there are small signs that things are being implemented which are going to help us. and the press is one of them, because that sets the tone for how you are in possession as well. Because if you are kind of on that press, you are engaging quickly, you are looking to suffocate, essentially. That's what really good high press teams do. They suffocate you. If you're like that off the ball, when you get on the ball, your intention is going to be, you're going to have a lot more, not necessarily ferocity, that's not necessarily the word, but you can have much more purpose about how you move.
Yeah.
Now, we do need to improve that side. We are still quite lax in terms of that injection, but I think that also comes with lacking maybe that injection of pace in the team, which potentially we can hopefully rectify this summer. But again, we need to maybe put that into our passing a bit more and be a bit more inventive. I do think that will improve if you do add the likes of Fornals into the team and so on. But all in all, yes, it was a tough watch. It wasn't a great game. It was a bit of a grind. But there are some positives I can see from how we're setting up defensively. Also in the way Paqueta is becoming far more engaged in games, and with Rice, that pairing is looking good. And again, I've always said it, I don't mind a player losing a pass or two if they are trying to actually do something with it. So some of the critiques around, Paqueta will lose the ball. Yeah, he will. But that's because he's trying to essentially get lower percentage passes through, which are of higher risk.
He will also play those balls over the top like we saw with Emerson.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of low percentage, high risk, so it's kind of, you sometimes have to do that rather than just recycling the ball. And I think we've got we're in a bad position. We need to be safe. The point is we're in a bad position. We need to kind of remove some of those shackles, to be honest, and try and be a bit more flexible, because when you constantly are playing in a way that is setting up to let's keep it tight, once all of a sudden you're going out on the pitch and you're already in that mindset of we need to keep it tight, when you're then going, okay guys, we're now behind, we need you to open up, it's hard to then break out that mentality to also, again, just kind of relax yourself, say, right, we now just need to be free. So I think that we need to embrace that freedom a bit more. We are starting to look better in the press, but again, we have to embrace and we have to improve other areas and kind of be a bit more flexible. But key takeaways, again, defensively, looking better from the press perspective. Paqueta is looking far more settled, but there's still work to do.
Absolutely. I think it was a tough watch. Like, let's make no mistake of that. It was very difficult to watch as a fan. And I think going forwards, with the key issues are still there. Like the highlight, what we've highlighted for many weeks now, is still a problem with a lack of creativity in that final third. And if we are going to play something like a 5-3-2 to start off with, it's very clear what our intent is. And there wasn't, in that, especially in that first half, there was no clear plan in terms of our attacking phases. There was a clear plan defensively to keep it tight and stop Brentford from scoring. But other than that, we really lacked ideas up top. But again, that kind of comes down to the personnel as well on the pitch, because, we were missing Skamaka. Fornals wasn't on the pitch, Ben Rama. So I think going forwards, a 4-3-3, again, would be my preferred formation, especially with two massive games coming up. But overall, for that match, who was your standout player out of the 11 that started, or even someone that maybe came on? Because Ben Rama got the official vote on our West Ham Twitter.
I think Ben Rama got a goal, but I think that, to me, isn't right, that he is deemed as the man of the match. Bryce had a very good game, was absolute quality. But for me, the two players that I enjoyed in the game more were both Paqueta and Aged.
Yeah.
I think Aged's impact for us in possession is going to be so important. The way he carried the ball out of defence, which again is something we've talked about, is that having that player who's willing to commit and drive essentially out of defence into midfield creates an overload. It means someone else can drop into his position in which to then enact another pass. It's those kind of things that he does, and also the fact that he can break lines. The Antonio one we talked about, that ball went from defence. He broke two lines of their defence essentially with that one pass, and then Antonio uses that to spin in and go behind. So having players who can do that and that those in the back line are so important to help you in possession and also mean that you can break teams down a lot quicker.
Yeah.
That being said, for me, Paqueta would be my man of the match. His work rate was incredible. Worked so well in tandem with Rice. And as I say, the likely point where Rice was beaten or Rice wasn't in a position, Paqueta was there as well to kind of get in. He doesn't mind doing those niggly little tackles to kind of break things down. He's always looking to keep us going. So for me, despite Rice's brilliant display, which it was, and the fact that he essentially set up the goal for Benrahma, I'm going with Paqueta because I think his overall contribution, if he was not on the pitch, I think it would have been a much harder game for us to have managed. I think if that was a two-man pivot of Souček and Rice, I think we'd have been so much worse in possession than what many of people have said we were. And we were at times, let's be fair. I think without him, we would be in much more dire straits. And the way he's now starting to settle more is only a good thing. And I think with the likes of Aged coming in as well, is only going to now see the team improve. But again, there are other aspects tactically that need to be refined to help them kind of perform at an even higher level than what they're at.
I hope that game kind of highlighted to fans that Paqueta is an 8 and not a 10. And, that industrial work that we've spoken about before is that, that was an exact example right there because, Brentford away in an FA Cup match, he's gone there in, let's be real, really difficult conditions with the pitch, the wind, the rain, and put in an absolutely brilliant shift for the team. And for me, it was close between those two as well. But I actually went with Aged myself just because of how much composure he brought to that back line when we were trying to, like you mentioned, play through those lines and, clean sheet. First clean sheet in feels like an eternity. And, all three centre-backs, deserve some credit for that. I thought Bonner was really good in the centre. Dawson as well played his part. And it was nice to see the fans behind the goal supporting Dawson with his song a lot throughout that first half as well. So it's nice that they're still backing him despite, calls for him to be dropped as well. So, but for me, it was Aged just because of what he brought, the difference he brought to our defence and, that composure as well when we had the ball. But
I'm going to go with Aged, to be honest. Let's say Aged, man of the match for us.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, we've ended with a win. We're through to the fourth round. Expect a difficult tie because that normally seems to happen with us for some reason, but we're in the hat.
Man City away, knowing us.
Yeah. I know in our preview we said we weren't bothered, but now it feels like we're just a touch closer to Wembley. So maybe my attitude has changed a bit depending on the draw we get next week. But next week for the next round. But yeah, it's a win. There were some positives to take, so we will take those moving forwards. And now we've got huge 2 games coming up in the league with Wolves and Everton. So this is where it matters. This is where we hope Moyes' words come to fruition with, he's seeing things happen. But yeah, we'll see. Any final thoughts?
No, like I say, I think the magnitude of the next few games, I don't think is lost on those at the club. They are 2 huge 6-pointers. We have to kind of hope that Wolves don't kind of feel slightly, I think they have a right to feel aggrieved about the next game. And I hope they don't kind of take that kind of as motivation to really go into the next game, which obviously will be us. But if we can win or at least get 4 points in those games, that will be huge. I think really anything less than 4 points in those games, we really do have to consider Moyes' position.
Yeah.
I think 4 points has to be the minimum. If we don't achieve 4 points, then I would seriously consider the alternative options. And there are plenty of alternative options for us to look at. It's just a matter of whether we're willing to pay to bring in one of those alternative options, which I think we all know the answer to that one.
Exactly. But we'll end this there anyway with a win. So we're going to go away happy this weekend. And yeah, make sure to follow us over on Twitter at Babbling Irons if you do enjoy the content. And as always, leave a like on the video, subscribe as well. We're pushing the subscribers this year and hopefully more of you are enjoying the content. We've got lots of analysis coming in this January window as well. And throughout the summer, I'm sure we'll be very busy in that window as well. So yeah, that's it from us today. We end it with a win. We end it with happy faces. And Mike, until next time.
Exactly. Come on, you Irons.
Bye.